Alright, before I even get started, if you are not caught up through the end of Series 8 of Doctor Who, you need to go away right now. Just turn this off and walk away. Everybody left is caught up, right? Good, because I've been wanting to talk about this actually since even before it was announced that Peter Capaldi was going to be the 12th Doctor. I want to talk about the possibility of the Doctor becoming female, and specifically why I think that may not be a great idea. Now, I'm really hoping people are going to stick with me as I explain this, because I'm not just saying, oh, Doctor should always be a man. I want to explain this. I've got reasons for feeling this way. And given what just went on in terms of the Master now becoming Missy, I think I really need to talk about it because I feel like we might as well start a clock for when they're eventually going to give us a female Doctor. And I know there are a lot of people out there who want a female Doctor, but part of what bothers me and part of the reason I need to make this video is most of the people who are arguing, oh, the Doctor should be a female, seem to have as the heart of their argument, because it's time. Well, that's not a fully developed reason. I'm not saying it's a completely invalid one. I'm not saying that's not part of the conversation, but for a character that's been around this long, you've got to have more reason than that to change something so fundamentally, because it's got things that it's got to overcome and it's got issues that it's got to deal with, and that's mainly what I'm going to talk about here. I'm not actually saying that the Doctor should never be female or that a female Doctor could never work. I actually would be very happy to see a female Doctor work. I've said a lot in various videos that one of my favorite things is to be proven wrong. I love seeing something that I don't think is going to work and just watching it succeed. I love that. I had that happen to me a few times in Series 8 of Doctor Who. Robot of Sherwood was a great example. I don't like the historical set episodes where he meets a famous figure, but that was a fantastic episode. I loved it. I went in thinking I was going to hate it. So I like it when that happens, when something can take something that shouldn't work and makes it work. What I don't want to see happen is I don't want to see the people behind Doctor Who caving to pressure from this growing population that seems to have a basic argument of, well, why not? Well, I'm gonna tell you why not. Or not why not, but why we can't just barrel ahead blindly into this idea. There's two major hurdles that have got to be overcome if the Doctor is ever to become a female. One is more or less logistical, one is philosophical. I'm gonna start with the logistical problems. Now, in talking about the logistics, I'm gonna have to go into a lot of history and a lot of backstory, even going back into the classic era. There's a lot we still don't know about regeneration in terms of how exactly it works and what Time Lords can or can't control about their new bodies. There seems to be a very limited degree of control over certain aspects. For example, River Song was concentrating on a dress size when she regenerated in Let's Kill Hitler. In Utopia, Derek Jacobi as the Master made it clear that he wanted to become younger as a reflection of the Doctor, so him becoming John Sim, a visibly, physically younger character, also seems to have been a conscious choice. But there's all sorts of stuff that is clearly just left up basically to chance, things like hair and liver color. And the problem is we don't really know what is something that they have control over and what's something they don't have control over. Now, I do need to touch on the one sort of anomalous regeneration really quickly, and that was Romana's. Because the thing is, she comes in and basically seems to try on several bodies and before deciding on one, and seems to have absolute complete control over the body that she does in fact end up choosing. The thing is though, we don't know the circumstances of that regeneration. We never have. It may in fact have been a completely voluntary regeneration, and that may have been what gave her that degree of control, as opposed to all the other regenerations we've seen, which have been to prevent someone from dying, and they were more sort of last minute desperation in dire circumstances. So maybe in a calmer situation doing it completely voluntarily, maybe they're granted further control. I mean, the real answer why Romana did that is because Douglas Adams was the script director at that point and he thought it would be funny. So I think we need to not dwell on that one too much. So let's look back about what we know about regenerations and about the regenerations that we've seen. I'm about to throw a whole lot of numbers at you. We are on our 13th physical body for the Doctor. We've had 7 incarnations of the Master, 3 of River Song and 2 of Romana. Now, what we can also add in is Time Lord characters who we've seen played by more than one actor and are clearly in different bodies, even though we did not see the actual regeneration happen. That allows us to add in 2 Rassilons and 4 incarnations of former Lord President Barusa. So if you haven't been doing the math, that's 31 confirmed incarnations of different Time Lords. Why did I just throw all those numbers at you? Well, because out of those 31, Missy is the only one that we've seen gender swapped. That would seem to lean towards gender being something that they choose to change as opposed to being a random factor. If gender was just going to be completely left up to chance, we should have seen more gender swaps up to this point just by law of averages. Now, I will grant it's possible that maybe gender is a random factor, but it only has, say, a 1 in 50 chance of swapping from one to the other. I don't think that's the case, though, because if we look at Missy and the characterization of Missy, the Master has really embraced femininity in a way that I don't think someone who just randomly just found themselves in the body of the other gender would do. It really seemed like that was something that that character wanted to have happen. And I want to add into that what we know about the Corsair, which was our original confirmed gender swap. Now, the Corsair is a character who we have never seen, but is talked about and mentioned in The Doctor's Wife. And what the Doctor tells us about the Corsair points very much towards a hedonistic personality. Now, that's important because a hedonist, someone who is very into all the pleasures of the world, is the kind of person who would voluntarily swap genders just so that they could experience all the pleasures that are unique to that gender. All this put together, to me, it really points heavily towards gender being something that is chosen and not a random factor. And I'm sure there are some people out there who are going to point to Matt Smith's initial regeneration, where for a hot second he thought he was a girl. But let's also remember he needed to confirm that he had legs and 10 fingers, and we've never seen a regeneration where they're missing limbs. I think that can just be attributed to the general regeneration wonkiness. So it does look like gender is not random. So if the Doctor ever is going to become a woman, it can't just be a random, he had no control over it. He's going to have to choose to become a woman. Why is that a problem? Why can't he do that? Well, the problem is he hasn't up to this point. And I don't just mean that in a way like, well, he didn't decide up to now, he can never decide it. Here's the thing. It's not that the Doctor is above sort of rash or hasty decisions. He certainly made them at various points. So the idea of him deciding on a whim that he's going to become a woman wouldn't necessarily be out of character. But here's the thing. The Doctor, the 11th Doctor, we called him the 11th, Matt Smith, was actually in what he believed was going to be his final regeneration. We didn't know that at the time. We didn't really find that out until the War Doctor got introduced, and then all that got made very clear in the time of the Doctor. That we found out that Matt Smith knew, and presumably has always known, that he was in what was supposed to be his last body. What that means is if he was ever going to decide, oh, I should be a woman while I still have the chance to at least try that once, he needed to have done it before he was in what he believed was his last body. If there was any part of him that had an inherent desire to be a woman, he would have done that before he ran out of chances. Yes, he's got a whole new regeneration cycle with Capaldi that for all we know is infinite and he can go on forever, but he didn't know that was going to happen. He thought he was done. And even knowing that, he never decided to become a woman. That's something that you can't just ignore or gloss over. And again, I'm not saying that he could never decide to become a woman, but it needs to have more than just he decided on a whim. There needs to be something more fueled by the character or some sort of compelling circumstances that are going to drive that decision. What could that reason or those circumstances be? I have absolutely no idea, but I do think they do need to exist, and it can't just be because we feel like it. Moving aside from the logistical issues, we get into the philosophical debate, because I really do worry that changing the Doctor to a female is going to too drastically and fundamentally change the dynamics of the character and how the character is intended to work. The Doctor's relationships with people, whether they are his companions or people that he just runs into, has always been fundamentally paternal in nature. He's got that protective streak, but he's also a little bit emotionally distant, sort of the classic archetypal father figure. Of course, the gender swap version of a paternal figure is a maternal figure. Now, but there's a real big difference between maternal and paternal, because a maternal figure is going to inherently have a more emotional connection with those people, whereas the paternal figure is more emotionally distant, as the Doctor tends to be. It's not that he doesn't have emotions, he's not expressing them outwardly. Now, I'm not trying to make this a sexist argument. I'm not saying women always wear their emotions on their sleeves. I'm just talking about the general natures and the archetypes of these sorts of relationships. And of course, paternal figures can kind of run a gamut, a bit like the Doctor himself. They can be more hands-on and a little bit more gentle. They can be a bit more gruff and a bit more, why aren't you doing what I tell you? Which the Doctor has run that scale. Maternal figures, on the other hand, maternal and motherly tends to be a bit more rigidly defined than a father figure. Father figures, I I don't know, they seem to have the freedom to have more room to breathe, but still fit the definition of a paternal father figure. Motherly figures, it seems like it's a much narrower definition, and I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to do as much with the character. That's assuming that they even try and make the character maternal as opposed to paternal, because really what they should do is keep it paternal, because that's fundamentally what the character has always been. But what I'm saying is, if we keep the character consistent and keep that paternal instinct, having a woman express the paternal tendencies is gonna read somewhat off. It's gonna read, in some ways, kind of defective, because when you have female characters and who have difficulty expressing their emotions, that's not seen as a positive character trait. Not that it's necessarily positive in men, but it's expected in men. In women, when you have characters that are sort of more emotionally compressed and stunted, that's seen much more as an outright flaw. And then there's some of the specific stuff that the Doctor tends to do rather frequently, such as he will frequently let people, his potential enemies, think that he is an idiot. And that's all very much playing off expectations, because the standard, stereotypical, generic expectation is the man walks into the situation and takes charge. When he bumbles in and acts like an idiot, they dismiss him. Well, when a woman comes in and does that, she's not just being a bumbling idiot playing against expectations. First of all, there's no set expectation that she's going to come in and take charge anyway, so she's not subverting anything by acting like an idiot. And when a woman acts in the way that the Doctor has frequently acted to make himself look stupid, she becomes something a little bit more specific. She becomes a ditz. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of stuff that the Doctor does that if a woman were to do, just changing that gender carries over a lot of baggage. And that change from one to the other, suddenly the dynamic of the character isn't functioning the way it normally does or the way it's supposed to. The fact that the Doctor, his first instinct is to run from danger is another example. Yes, the Doctor will eventually stand up and take charge, but his first instinct when encountering danger is to run and then figure it out. What's the stereotypical male action hero? He stands and fights with fists or a gun or whatever, and the Doctor doesn't do that. Again, subverting the expectation. When the Doctor, if he was to ever become a woman, again, there's no expectation that she would be standing up and fighting with fists and guns in the first place. So running away, it loses that subversion of the stereotypical hero. And instead, it's now actually more playing to expectations rather than subverting them. See, changing the gender is going to carry a whole lot of baggage. Now, it's our baggage as viewers. To be fair, it's not the fault of the character. It wouldn't be the fault of the writers. It's the viewers and general audience's baggage about gender roles and gender stereotypes. But that baggage exists. You can't act like it doesn't. And I just worry that that baggage would sink the show. I have a feeling at this point it's kind of inevitable. It's gonna happen at some point. I'm hoping it'll be a ways down the road. And I'm not gonna suddenly tune out if it's a female Doctor. I'll tune in. Like I said, if they ever do it, I wanna see it work. One of my greatest joys was Matt Smith becoming my favorite Doctor when I completely wrote him off at his initial casting. I thought he was gonna be terrible. I thought he was going to be a Tennant knockoff, and he became my favorite. So I'm completely open to this working. I just want to see the people behind it, when it inevitably happens, put the thought to address all this stuff and not just do it because it's time, or because there's this outside pressure, or because they can. Because if they don't address this stuff, or they don't at least factor it in some way and take this stuff into consideration, we'll be losing that classic, lovable, paternal figure for no good reason. So that's my thoughts on this. This has been percolating for a long time, and with what happened with Missy, I need to get it out there. What are your thoughts on all this? I'd be more than happy to hear them. Whatever it is you think, whether you think I've got a point, whether you think I'm completely crazy, hopefully you don't just think I'm sexist. I hope I backed my arguments up better than that, but you know what? Whatever it is you think, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Until next time, this council is adjourned.